Rather beautiful, aren't they? They're products of the Sigma technology, the perfect blending of two separate animals. Far superior to anything you'd find in nature.
Interesting, pets.
Relic Entertainment released some great games over the years. Their first game was the excellent space strategy game Homeworld. They would later develop games like Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, Company of Heroes, and even got the chance to make Age of Empires 4. But back in 2003 they released Impossible Creatures. It's a light-hearted RTS game which carried something of a cult following over the years, especially after Nordic Games re-released it on Steam and GOG in 2015 with support for modern systems and re-enabled multiplayer. It also has a Steam Workshop integration, so you can download new maps and mods from within the game itself. The support for modern systems means you can run it as is when you buy it. No widescreen patches or any other tricks required. The older disc versions tend to have quite a few issues with modern hardware and operating systems, but with this digital re-release, it's just download and play with higher frame rates added as an extra bonus. Right after the turn of the millennium, gamers had started to complain that the mechanics of RTS games had mostly become stale and overly familiar. The early 90s saw pioneering games like Dune 2 and Total Annihilation, followed by masterpieces such as StarCraft, Age of Empires and the Command & Conquer series. And while the rock-paper-scissors relationship between units had been complicated by games with 3 or more asymmetrical factions, the idea of units and counter-units remained fundamental. Warcraft 3 introduced a persistent hero unit into the battlefield to spice things up, but Impossible Creatures took on a different approach. Its main selling point was the ability to fuse two animals together with different parts to create a wide variety of possible unit combinations and different tactics. And while other aspects of RTS games remain intact, such as resource gathering, base building and technology research, Relic Entertainment managed to make a fun and quirky game with this unique mechanic. Impossible Creatures offers 3 main modes of play: a lengthy campaign mode, a human vs CPU skirmish mode and multiplayer. The campaign mode centers on a guy named Rex Chance who is trying to find his father and goes on a search for him in the Pacific. When he arrives, he is attacked by strange animals and saved by a girl named Lucy Willing. He learns from her that his father was doing genetic research for a criminal mastermind named Upton Julius and came up with something called the Sigma technology. This allows for 2 animals to be fused together to form hybrids of the animals, like an owl with the tail and the head of a chameleon, or a tiger with the pincers and body of a scorpion. Rex sets out on a quest to find his father and take revenge on the evil Upton Julius and his henchmen. The names of the characters should be an immediate indication that the tone of the story is not a serious one, and it's better for it. It did a decent job of keeping me interested through the campaign, and the funny moments even made me chuckle a couple of times. Although some of the jokes can strike a politically incorrect note nowadays, for the most part the jokes stick their landing.
We've got to stop the rest of them.
Slow down, sister. The villages are safe. Valik is grounded. Why don't we enjoy the sunset together?
The light-hearted tone continues in the overall presentation as well, with bright and colorful graphics, an upbeat jazzy tune from the moment you start up the game, and the in-game violence is kept to a minimum. You won't see any blood here, and whenever an attack lands on a unit or worker, it's like he's just pushed around a bit. Also, the critters themselves can be hard to differentiate. On the surface you'll see what type of unit you're dealing with, but to get something more specific like what abilities it actually has, you'll have to select it and go over its stats manually. And in an intense or large fight, this can feel a bit clunky. Spotting the weaknesses of enemy units isn't intuitive and leads to a lot of trial and error tactics. But despite all the different stats and abilities a creature can have, they are still grouped into basic types, essentially melee, ranged, swimming, flying, etc. And when you look at it this way, suddenly it feels far less unfamiliar. With this in mind, the gameplay from Impossible Creatures can feel a lot more classic RTS style than it first let on, and after a while I tended to fall back into similar strategies that I used in games that preceded it. Matches in all 3 modes follow the tried and true RTS gameplay of starting out with a main base building, called the lab, and some workers. Queue up more workers, start collecting coal, and build a few lightning rods to gather electricity. Those are the two resources in the game. Build up your base with creature and research chambers and start producing some units to scout out the map and find where your enemies are lurking and what they are doing. Level up your base at your lab to get access to stronger creatures and technologies. There are a lot of different abilities like regeneration, camouflage, poison attacks, digging, attack and defensive bonus when in a group, so trying out all different strategies and skirmish modes can be a lot of fun on its own, and playing against the different armies the game provides or you can come up with yourself can keep you occupied for some time in between or after you finish the campaign.
Think of these, my most precious creations.
One of my favorite strategies is to have a bunch of ranged units with camouflage put together with some strong melee units attacking the front of a base, so the enemy's units are occupied, and then have a few strong tank units with a digging ability just dig under their defenses and wreak havoc inside their base. And another is having lots of fast flying lobster units to go straight for their lab. With their barrier destroy ability they can take down buildings a lot faster. The creature combiner itself can be a lot of fun to play around with, and even tiny changes have an impact on the creature's stats and abilities. I myself spent quite a few hours tinkering around swapping out parts on animals to see what they do and to trying to find the strongest animals to use in my army. Ultimately, it comes down to a combination of the lobster with a high health mammal, together with a high defense range unit and maybe a flying whale of sorts, but I had plenty of fun working out these combinations and subtle stat changes myself. In the campaign mode you'll have to hunt down these animals to add them to your genetic library. At first the campaign does a fairly good job with its progression, having 3 or 4 animals roam around the map to find, but later on it has a few big difficulty spikes while still introducing 3 or more new animals. And as most of these missions start out with the enemy rushing your base, you'll have to find these quickly. Your stronger units from previous missions won't be available because your base isn't level up enough, so you can't deal with any new combination the enemy throws at you. This combined with a scarcity of resources in later missions can make it quite hard to get through, but once you've found a good unit combination yourself to deal with these initial rushes, you should be fine. In skirmish and multiplayer all stock animals are unlocked, and you'll have to pre-combine your army that you'll want to use in the main menu. Battles themselves both in the campaign and skirmish modes aren't really that exciting or visceral, mainly because your units don't really seem to connect during fights. Maybe it's just the aging graphics or the fact that unit AI and pathfinding can feel a bit hit or miss, but I think it would definitely benefit if they did a proper remaster for it, because the underlying idea is a cool one. When you buy the current digital release of Impossible Creatures, it will work like a charm on a modern PC, with nice high stable frame rates and resolutions, and it comes bundled with the Insect Invasion expansion. This pack ups the number of stock creatures to 76 instead of the base game's 51, and focuses primarily on, you guessed it, insect and spider variations. It doesn't come with a separate campaign though, so you'll only be able to use these new animals in skirmish or multiplayer maps, although there is a mod that lets you use the insect invasion creatures in the main campaign. As I mentioned before, the Steam Workshop is integrated right into the game and allows for maps and mods to be downloaded. One of the more substantial mods is definitely the Tellurian mod, and this does a number of different things. First of all, it adds another 27 stock animals to the game and tries to balance out the ones that are already available, so that as much of them are as useful as possible. It also ups the population cap from 75 to 250, introduces new camera controls that lets you zoom out a lot further, they should have called this Impossible Commander Forged Creatures or something, and they added in their own unofficial Tellurian campaign. This uses the same story and cutscenes from the base game, but alters the mission maps and lets you use all the creatures in the campaign. Tellurian is also considered the standard when you try to play multiplayer, so if you're looking to try it out, you'll generally have better luck finding a match when you play with Tellurian enabled. There are other mods available as well, like Creature Chaos or Invasion of the Killer Ants, but the Tellurian mod is considered to be the most polished and the one to try out if you want to dip your toes into modding Impossible Creatures. So in conclusion, I can recommend Impossible Creatures if you're in the market for a fun light RTS game with a unique mechanic and a wacky atmosphere. The campaign will keep you occupied for about 25 hours, and the Tellurian mod can stretch it out quite a bit as well. It's also relatively cheap at $10, and I found it on sale for $2.50. It feels quite familiar for anyone who tried their hand at an RTS game before with simple base building and research mechanics, And even if you have no experience with the genre, the tutorial does a pretty good job of explaining all the mechanics to you. So if you're in the market for something creative and different, or just want to experience some of that classic RTS gameplay, it's a safe bet, you won't regret it. Anyway, that's it for me today. So what's your opinion on Impossible Creatures? Have you played it back in the day or recently? And what are some of the wacky critter designs you've come up with? Also, I've been thinking about what my next review should be. So if you think of any RTS or other games you would like to see me do a video about, let me know in the comments. And if you like the video and want to see me continue doing these in the future, be sure to like and share it and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one. Peace!